Blakewood School. You look at the place and find it hard to believe it is 50 years old. It has weathered the years well and still serves the people of South Milwaukee. This story will follow the construction of Blakewood School and the evolution of the area around the building. The construction begins in 1970 in the sparsely populated southwestern corner of South Milwaukee. At that time, there were some houses along Forest Hill Avenue and more homes to the east of the intersection of 15th Avenue and Blake, but that's about it. Blakewood Avenue was only found on the builder's map. 15th Avenue traveled through a farm field as it headed toward Forest Hill Cemetery. Today, this area has the farm fields replaced by subdivisions of family homes. Back in the 1970s, Blakewood School was to become an island in the middle of these farm fields. Many of the photographs in this presentation were taken during the construction of Blakewood Elementary. Gene Johansson was Blakewood's first janitor. Dave Weaver was the school's first principal. They took these photos and placed them on slides or in scrapbooks. These pre-construction photos show the area where Blakewood was going to be built. Those hundreds of pallets of orange bricks would eventually become Blakewood School. Look into the far background of the photos to see how truly isolated this area was back in 1970. Blakewood was dedicated on January 30th, 1970. The bond issue called for $1,946,041 to build it. I always thought Blakewood got its name from its location near the woods at Blake Avenue. Nope. The school district held a contest where all the 6th graders in town could submit a name for the new school. Dawn Lepak won the $25 savings bond prize for the name Blakewood School. They poured concrete and raised the steel skeleton that would eventually become Blakewood School. I've always wondered how many bricks were needed to build this school inside and out. One of the architectural highlights of Blakewood School are the tile pieces along the roof line. These photos condense months of construction into just a few photographs, but it gives you a good idea of how massive this structure is and the complexities of building a modern grade school. And that's just the outside of the building. This next set of photographs will cover the construction of the interior of Blakewood School. I always found it interesting to see what things looked like before the carpeting and the ceiling tiles and lights were installed. I've added some modern views that match the spot where the original photos were taken. These photos show the Blakewood office area before the installation of the glass. Dave Weaver, Irv Nowak, and Dan Cupertino were the first 3 principals at Blakewood. Blakewood opened in 1971. There was no hot lunch. We were a neighborhood school without a neighborhood. A few students would go home for lunch, but most of the children would bring a box lunch and eat here. We had 1st through 6th grade eating lunch at Blakewood in those days. There was only half-day kindergartners at that time. Who ever heard of an air-conditioned grade school in the Wisconsin climate back in the 1970s? South Milwaukee was very forward in their planning. Blakewood became the elementary summer school because of this air-conditioned perk. There was a pool of water deep in the bowels of the building that cools the air needed to chill a structure this size. Above every classroom is a maze of conduits that carry off the warmed air and replace it with cooled air. And the process is reversed when warm air is required during the rest of Wisconsin's 10 months of winter. Blakewood has had 2 elevators in its 50-year history. The first elevator was for freight only. Wheelchairs and crutch-wielding students had to get a quick course in elevator operations before being allowed to use the thing. New handicap access laws made the old elevator obsolete and a bit dangerous, so a larger, more normal kind of elevator was installed during one of the summer months. Imagine the workers had to install all of the black strips that cover every interior wall along the white-painted concrete block. The learning centers were what made Blakewood School stand out in its design. Having a place to gather the entire grade level was a wonderful addition to any teacher's workday. Behind that screen was, for its time, an ultra-modern 1971 film strip projector, slide projector, and a 16mm movie projector, which could be controlled by a 4-button panel right there in the Learning Center. Everything was hooked up to a sound system, and this made Blakewood a state-of-the-art educational building for 1971. There was an evolution from those film strip, slide, and movie projectors to VCRs, DVDs, and computers. Those audio-visual rooms became storage areas, and the machinery was removed. When Blakewood opened, there were 3 classrooms at each grade level, 1 through 6. Try and imagine just bringing in desks for all of those students. There were 600 plus students that moved over to Blakewood from Parkway School and Lakeview School. Some students who lived near 5th Avenue and south of Columbia Avenue and the southeastern portion of South Milwaukee were now bused over to the new Blakewood School. Blakewood wasn't just a new modern air-conditioned building. Blakewood was built along the Learning Center model. Students were there to move around, taught in large and small groups by different teachers and different grade levels. A 4th grader who was advanced in math could move up to the advanced levels and be taught with the 5th and 6th graders. And a 6th grader who was behind on their math skills could get the remedial help they needed. It wasn't perfect, but the cooperative spirit of the place had Blakewood School adopt a different starting time and school ending time than the other elementary schools in town. We would teach school for an extra 15 minutes, 4 days each week, so that on Thursdays we could end school an hour early so the teachers could get together and plan. There were no doors on our classrooms. The teachers never sat behind that huge teacher desk in the front of the room. Each grade level had 2 experienced teachers who transferred over from other South Milwaukee schools, and each grade level had a new, recent college graduate who had no teaching experience. There was also an evolution of the residential area around Blakewood School. As you have noticed, there wasn't much to see back in the first days. The nearest house was blocks away and the farmland didn't even have roads in 1970. Things have really changed in the past 50 years. Blakewood Avenue was built at the same time as the school, and parts of the upgrade were being added after the building was already open. Look across the street and see how the area has grown into a suburban housing area. What was once a treeless farm field now contains houses, and mature trees have grown tall. 50 years of growth in just a few seconds. Back in 1971, Blakewood had two playgrounds. One was on the north side of the building and was used by the first, second, and third graders. It was a crowded playground. There were swings and other playground equipment, but one unforeseen consequence of this north side location was the lack of sunlight. Blakewood is a tall, two-story building, so this playground was always in the shade and was cold and windy, and the snow and ice on the playground wouldn't melt until May. The residential area north of Blakewood took a little longer to develop than the land to the west of the school. The teachers' parking lot was eventually moved to the north side playground, and all the students were moved to the main playground, and recesses and lunchtimes were staggered. The Blakewoods are on the east side of the school building. Blake Avenue meets 15th Avenue just to the east of this gathering of trees that has been used as a nature area, a nesting place for hawks and owls, and a maple syrup production area for Mr. Joe and Miss Pritzlaff. 15th Avenue borders the Blakewood property on the east. 50 years later, and the entire area is covered with houses. That sidewalk out the back of Blakewood School was the main walking route for most of our local students before the houses were built on the west side of the school. That's the Blakewoods, and that area hasn't changed much over the years. There have been many changes in education curriculum, faculty, administration, and students. The one thing that has remained the same is the still modern-looking building on the southwest side of South Milwaukee. The outside looks almost exactly the same as it did back in 1971. The inside has changed carpet colors. Over the years, all the classrooms have doors. But even though the outside of the place looks the same, there are different teachers, secretaries, principals, custodians, making it all work so well. I consider myself fortunate to have worked in South Milwaukee. Dave Weaver hired me. Irv Nowak was my boss for the middle years, and Dan Cupertino helped me in the final years of my career. I still enjoy going back to South Milwaukee just to drive past Blakewood Elementary School. It looks pretty good, even though it's pushing 50.